After 8 years of building a tech giant, my husband fired me for his mistress. He stole my title, but he forgot I wrote the code, and I just started a 10-minute countdown to his total ruin. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The morning light hit the mahogany desk in the corner office, but it didn't feel like the success we had promised each other 3 years ago. It felt like a stage. Jacob sat behind the desk we bought at an estate sale when we had nothing, his face set in a mask of corporate detachment. Melissa stood right beside him, her fingers resting on his shoulder with a casual, sickening ownership. She wore a red dress that screamed for attention, a sharp contrast to the cold, professional silence in the room. I stood there, my hand steady, even as my chest felt like it was being hollowed out with a dull spoon. "Congratulations, you were terminated," Jacob said, his voice carrying a practiced authority that made my skin crawl. "Take your old laptop and get out. This $8 million company is mine now, and Melissa will take your place. The divorce papers arrive tomorrow." He slid a manila folder across the desk. I didn't touch it. My eyes were locked on his wedding ring, the one he promised would mean we were partners in everything. 50-50 in business and in life. That was the lie that built Next Core Solutions. I looked at Melissa, the woman I had mentored and welcomed into our home, and she didn't flinch. She just smiled, that patronizing smile she had used for months to undermine my work in front of investors. "Security is waiting outside," Jacob added, his eyes flicking toward the door where 2 guards I had chatted with every morning for years were now standing like jailers. "You have 10 minutes to clear your desk." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached for the old laptop bag he had gestured to, the one with the coffee stain on the corner from our first product launch. He thought he was being generous, letting me keep the sentimental scraps of our startup days. He had no idea he was handing me a loaded weapon. My fingers brushed the phone in my pocket. It vibrated once. The timer I had set 6 months ago had just gone off. I knew my hidden code would activate in exactly 10 minutes, and the $8 million empire he thought he just stole was sitting on a foundation of digital sand. The walk through the office felt like a funeral procession, where I was the only one who knew the body was still twitching. Developers I had hired and trained looked away as I passed, their eyes glued to their screens. Word traveled fast in a company built on information. I saw Sarah, our lead developer, half rise from her chair, but I shook my head once, a silent warning to stay down. The air in the building felt sterile, heavy with the smell of the expensive perfume Melissa wore, the same scent I used to find on Jacob's shirts when he came home at 3 a.m, claiming he was working on revenue projections. At my desk, which was already being treated like a crime scene, the security guards stood a respectful distance away. I had 10 minutes to pack 3 years of my life into a cardboard box. I grabbed the coffee mug from our first successful launch, and the stress ball shaped like a bug that the team gave me as a joke. I left the awards and the certificates. They were just paper. The real value was in the bag slung over my shoulder. Jacob appeared in the glass doorway of his office, watching the countdown. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe a final platitude about how brilliant I was, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. I checked my watch. 5 minutes left. "Is that everything?" one of the guards asked, his voice low and apologetic. "That's everything," I said. I walked out of the glass doors we had chosen together because they represented transparency. The Seattle drizzle hit my face as I reached the sidewalk, sharp and clean. I didn't get in my car. I crossed the street to a loading zone and turned around, looking up at the building. My phone buzzed in my hand. 9:10 a.m. The first ripple hit the lobby almost immediately. Through the glass, I saw the receptionist, Emma, stand up and start gesturing wildly at her monitor. The calm, minimalist furniture of the lobby was suddenly swallowed by a swarm of people moving with an urgency that bordered on panic. The digital heartbeat of Next Core Solutions had just skipped a beat. The rain started to come down harder, but I stayed on the sidewalk, watching the theater of collapse. My phone began a cascade of automated messages. Firewall rules modified. Authentication timeout adjusted to 30 seconds. Backup verification disabled. It was like watching a bridge lose its bolts one quarter turn at a time. The structure would hold until the exact moment it couldn't. 3 people burst out of the main entrance, phones pressed to their ears. I recognized Gary from HR. He looked like the world was ending because, for him, it was. I could hear him shouting over the traffic. The entire client portal is down. They can't access anything. The portal was our crown jewel. It was where Fortune 500 companies monitored their security in real time. If that was dark, the phone lines inside would be lighting up like a Christmas tree. I saw a news van pull up to the curb, the reporter adjusting her jacket. A cybersecurity company under active attack was the kind of story that didn't wait for a press release. Inside the lobby, Jacob had descended from his executive throne. He was pacing back and forth, running his hand through his hair, a nervous tell I knew better than anyone. Melissa was right behind him, her red dress looking less like a power move and more like a target in the chaos. Someone ran across the lobby with a laptop under their arm, headed for the server room. My phone buzzed again. This wasn't a notification. It was a call from Richard Thompson, our lead investor. I let it ring 12 times before I answered. "Brenda, thank God," Richard shouted, his voice cracking. "What is happening? Our systems show the entire infrastructure is compromised." "I wouldn't know, Richard," I said, my voice as calm as the center of a storm. I was terminated at 9 a.m. Jacob felt my services were no longer required. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, the realization sinking in that he had backed the wrong founder. "Companies are pulling out," Richard whispered. "Our portfolio is hemorrhaging value. Can you fix this?" "I'm sitting in my car, Richard. I don't work there anymore." By noon, the stock price had plummeted from $47 to $12. The headlines were already everywhere. Cybersecurity giant falls to global attack. I was back at my house, the one Jacob said he would move out of tonight. I made a cup of tea and watched the feeds on my private laptop. The vulnerabilities I had strategically left open were being probed by attackers from 17 different countries: Moscow, Beijing, London. It was a feeding frenzy. The phone on my counter wouldn't stop ringing. Investors, former colleagues, and then at 10:47 a.m., Jacob's name appeared on the screen. I answered on the 4th ring. "Brenda, I need you to come back to the office immediately," he said. The CEO voice was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. I was escorted out by security, Jacob. "Remember?" "Stop playing games," he snapped, though the bravado was thin. "The entire system is failing. The code, your code, is the only thing that can fix this." "My code isn't the problem," I told him. "If you had kept the person who understood the system, you wouldn't be in this position." Melissa's voice came on the line, sharp and panicked. "Brenda, this is beneath you. Innocent people are being hurt." I cut her off. "You wanted the job, Melissa. You wanted the title. Now you get the consequences." Jacob grabbed the phone back. "I'm begging you." Those 3 words hung in the air. Jacob had never begged for anything in his life. He had manipulated, he had charmed, but he had never begged. I took a sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "I can't help you, Jacob. I don't have access anymore." "You made sure of that." I'll give you full admin access right now, he pleaded. Anything you want. And contaminate a federal crime scene? I asked. I'm sure the FBI would love that. The sound he made was almost a sob. I ended the call and went back to my laptop. The international humiliation was complete. Pacific Financial, the $100 million client I had saved just days before, had officially terminated their contract. The domino effect was brutal. The days following the collapse felt like waking up from a long, feverish dream. My house was quiet, the way it used to be, before the company took over every waking second. I spent my time in my home office, but I wasn't coding for Jacob anymore. I was auditing for new clients. Word had spread through the Seattle tech corridor that the woman who left NextCore, right before the crash, was the only one who actually knew how to build a fortress. I incorporated as Secure Guard Solutions. Within 2 weeks, I had more consulting work than I could handle. I was making more in a day than I had made in a month at the company I co-founded. Every morning, I checked the news. NextCore was a cautionary tale now. The office was ghostly, down to a skeleton crew of 15 people. They had shut the satellite offices and were trying to sublease the Seattle space. The final blow came when the FBI investigation concluded. While they found no evidence of sabotage, they found the financial irregularities I had documented months ago. The ghost companies Jacob and Melissa had used to embezzle funds. A knock came at my door late on a Thursday night. I looked through the peephole and saw a man who looked 10 years older than the husband who had fired me. His hair was uncombed, his shirt wrinkled. Jacob stood on my doorstep with his hands shaking. When I opened the door, he didn't try to push his way in. He just stood there, looking at the pale band of skin on his finger where his wedding ring used to be. "I'm here to beg," he whispered. "The company is dying, Brenda. I've got 2 weeks of capital left. I want to offer you 48% ownership, full technical autonomy, complete authority." I leaned against the doorframe, watching him crumble. "Why only 48%, Jacob? Why not 50? "Because I need to maintain control for the investors," he said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I let the silence stretch out, the rain starting to mist behind him. I thought about the platform, my life's work, sitting dormant in a dying shell. I thought about the 12 developers still there, the ones who had believed in me. "I need complete access to the real financial records," I said, "and I want it in writing that I have veto power over every single business decision you make." He nodded slowly, a man signing his own surrender. "I never should have underestimated you," he said. I looked past him into the dark. "You didn't just underestimate me, Jacob. You forgot who built your kingdom in the first place." The transition back into the office was like walking into a graveyard where the ghosts were still trying to file paperwork. I chose a seat in the conference room directly opposite Jacob, establishing the new power dynamic without saying a word, equal and opposing. The room was cold, the energy drained from the few employees who remained. They all stood when I entered, a gesture of respect that never would have happened 4 months ago. Jacob sat at the other end, his hands folded, looking like a man who was a guest in his own building. "Before we begin, I need to clarify the new structure," I announced, my voice cutting through the silence. "All technical decisions and hiring go through me. Jacob handles business operations, but any decision affecting the core product requires my explicit approval." I saw Richard Thompson nod from the corner. He and the other investors were desperate. They knew that without me, their $8 million investment was worth zero. Jacob started to speak, habit taking over. "I think what Brenda means is—" I cut him off mid-sentence. I said exactly what I mean, and I don't need a translator. His face flushed, a deep red that matched Melissa's old dress. But he subsided. The meeting continued for 2 hours as I laid out the transformation plan. We weren't just fixing bugs. We were rebuilding the entire philosophy of the company. We were going to be the security firm that was honest about its scars. Transparency was our new currency. As I walked out, Sarah caught my eye. She didn't say anything, but the relief on her face was enough. I went straight to the server room. The air was humming with the sound of cooling fans, a sound that felt more like home than my actual house. I opened my laptop and began the real work. The vulnerabilities I had created were still there, small gaps in the code that only I knew how to bridge. I closed them one by one, feeling the system stabilize under my fingers. Jacob appeared in the doorway late that evening. "The monitoring systems are all green," he said quietly. "First time since January." "They'll stay that way," I replied without looking up. He lingered, probably hoping for a conversation, but I kept my eyes on the screen. I wasn't there for closure. I was there for my creation. By month 3, the Brenda Effect was in full swing. We had recovered 4 major clients, including Pacific Financial. Paul Harrison personally called me to sign the new contract, bypassing Jacob entirely. My name had become the company's seal of quality. But Jacob couldn't help himself. He started testing the boundaries of my authority. I walked into his office to find him interviewing a candidate for a CTO position I hadn't authorized. The young man looked promising, but he was in the middle of a power struggle he didn't understand. "Thank you for coming," I told the candidate, "but the position isn't available. We won't be hiring a CTO while I'm here." The candidate fled, and Jacob slammed his hand on the desk. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. "You went behind my back." "How does it feel?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He went quiet then, the memory of my termination hanging between us like a physical weight. He tried to pivot to cost-cutting, suggesting we reduce the development budget to save on operational expenses. I didn't even argue with him in private. I called an all-hands meeting in the break room. "Investment in our technical infrastructure is non-negotiable," I announced to the remaining staff. "In fact, we are doubling the equipment budget. Quality tools create quality products." Jacob tried to protest, claiming we couldn't afford it, but I shut him down with the Pacific Financial numbers. The developers looked at me with a mix of awe and relief. For the first time, the people building the product were more important than the man selling it. Later that night, we were alone, reviewing the quarterly reports. The numbers were staggering. We had surpassed our previous peak valuation, hitting $12 million. "You did it," Jacob said, his voice sounding hollow. "The vulnerabilities, the attack. You orchestrated all of it." I set down my pen and looked him directly in the eyes. "That's a serious accusation, Jacob." "It's an acknowledgement," he replied. "The timing was too perfect. No one else could have done it." "If you believe that, why haven't you gone to the police?" I asked. He laughed bitterly. "With what proof? You're too smart to leave evidence. And besides, I deserved it." "You destroyed my life," I said quietly. "You tried to steal my work and betrayed our marriage for an ego boost." "I was an idiot," he admitted, his hands clenching on the desk. "I threw away the best thing in my life." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." The momentum was unstoppable now. We were no longer a dying startup. We were the comeback story of the year. I incorporated a new set of predictive algorithms that turned our former weaknesses into a proactive defense system. Every time a hacker tried to probe our gates, the system learned, adapted, and countered before they could even finish their script. Jacob had become a figurehead. He handled the surface-level business meetings, but everyone knew where the real power resided. The investors only wanted to talk to me. The press only wanted my story. He had wanted to erase me from the company's history. And instead, I'd become the only part of it that mattered. 6 months after my return, we held a celebration in the office. We had grown back to 35 employees, and the energy was electric. I stood at the front of the room, alone. Jacob was off to the side, clapping along with the rest, but he looked like a shadow. Nextcore fell because we forgot what made us strong, I told the team. We forgot that technology isn't about appearance or politics. It's about building something that works. The applause was genuine, led by Sarah. I felt a sense of completion then, a closing of a loop that had started with a 10-minute timer. As the party wound down, Jacob approached me one last time. "You're the most brilliant person I've ever known," he said, his voice low so that others wouldn't hear. I just wish I'd remembered that before I lost everything that mattered. "You didn't lose everything," I reminded him, cold and precise. "You still have 52% of a $12 million company." "That's not what I meant," he whispered. I knew exactly what he meant, but that door had been locked and barred the moment he chose Melissa over me. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound, clean indifference. "Good night, Jacob," I said, gathering my things. I walked out of the building and into the cool Seattle night. The city lights were reflected in the wet pavement, a maze of silver and gray. My phone buzzed with a text from a reporter at a major tech magazine, wanting an exclusive on the greatest turnaround in cybersecurity history. I deleted it. The real story was too raw for a headline. It was a story about power. It was about the fact that the person you underestimate most is usually the one holding the keys to the kingdom. Jacob had thought he could take the castle and kick out the architect, forgetting that I knew every secret passage and every structural flaw. My consulting business, Secure Guard Solutions, was thriving alongside my work at Nextcore. I had built a future on my own terms, with no partners to betray me and no one to steal the credit for my sleepless nights. The house was finally quiet. The terracotta walls a constant reminder that I had remade my world in my own image. I stood on my deck, looking out at the skyline. Somewhere in that cluster of buildings was an office, where my code was protecting data for people who would never know my name. And that was fine. The code was mine, and the victory was absolute. Jacob had learned his lesson, but it had cost him his marriage, his reputation, and his soul. He would spend the rest of his life knowing that he was only successful because I allowed him to be. I took a final sip of my wine, the taste bitter and sweet in equal measure. I had been the heart of the company, and when they cut me out, they realized too late that the heart was the only thing keeping the body alive. The timer had reached 0 long ago, and from the ashes of that betrayal, I had built something impenetrable. I went inside and closed the door, the sound of the lock clicking into place, echoing in the silent, perfect house. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.